So now let's move on to unit vectors. Now let's assume that we have a vector A which has components 5, 12. Now let's try to find the magnitude of this vector. So the magnitude of vector A is given by the square root of the square of the x component plus the square of the y component. Now we have the x component to be 5 and the y component to be 12. So we have this equal to 5 square plus 12 square. Now 5 square is 25. 12 square is 144. Now if you should add the two values, then you have 169, and the positive square root of 169 is 13. Therefore, the magnitude of vector A is 13 units. Now if we should illustrate this on the xy plane, then we have this to be the y-axis and also the x-axis, and then we have O to be the origin. Now because we have the x component to be 5, we are going to move 5 units along the x-axis and also 12 units along the y-axis, and we have this to be the vector A. So the magnitude of vector A was obtained to be 13 units. Now what do you think will be the unit vector of vector A? Now the unit vector of vector A is basically the vector which has the same direction as of vector A but has a magnitude of 1. So the unit vector of vector A will be directed along this line, that is, it will have the same direction as vector A but has a magnitude of 1. So this is the unit vector of vector A and is denoted by A cap. So how do we find the unit vector A cap? So the unit vector directed along vector A is equal to vector A divided by the magnitude of vector A. So basically the unit vector of a given vector is equal to the vector divided by its magnitude. Now we have vector A to be 5, 12. So we divide through by the magnitude of vector A, and basically what we are going to do is we are going to divide each component of vector A by the magnitude of the vector. So we have 5 divided by 13, comma 12 divided by 13. And we can represent A cap in the vector component form as 5 over 13 I cap plus 12 over 13 J cap. So basically this is the unit vector of vector A, which has the same direction as vector A but has a magnitude of 1. So basically this is how to find the unit vector of any given vector. Now let's move on as we solve a couple of examples. So let's try our first example, example 1. Given that vector A is equal to 2I cap minus J cap plus 2K cap, and vector B is equal to negative I cap plus J cap minus K cap, find the unit vector in the direction of vector C, where vector C is equal to vector A plus vector B. So let's solve this question together. Now the first thing we are going to do is to find vector C, which is the sum of the two vectors A and B. Then we find the magnitude of vector C, And then lastly, the unit vector in the direction of vector C. So first of all, let's find the sum of the two vectors A and B. So we have vector C equals vector A plus vector B. Now we have the components of vector A to be 2, -1, 2, and that of vector B to be -1, 1, -1. So let's add corresponding components. Now 2 plus -1 is the same as 2 minus 1, and that is 1. -1 plus 1 is 0, and then 2 minus -1 is also 1. Therefore, we have vector C to be 1, 0, 1. Now let's find the magnitude of this vector. So the magnitude of vector C is given by the square root of the square of the x component plus the square of the y component plus the square of the z component. So now let's substitute the component values in place of x, y, and z. So we have the square root of, now x is 1, so 1 square plus y, 0 square plus z, 1 square. Now let's simplify this. 1 squared is 1, plus 1 squared is 2, plus 0 squared is still 2. So we have the square root of 2. Therefore, the magnitude of vector C is equal to the square root of 2 units. So this is the magnitude of vector C. Now to find the unit vector in the direction of vector C, that is given by C cap, and is equal to vector C divided by the magnitude of vector C. Now we have vector C to be 1, 0, 1. These are the components, and then we divide through by the magnitude of vector C, which is the square root of 2. So basically we are going to divide each component of the vector by its magnitude. So we have 1 over root 2, comma, 0, comma, 1 over root 2. Now because we have the denominator to be a z, we need to rationalize that. Therefore, if we have 1 over root 2, then we multiply both the numerator and the denominator by root 2, so that we have root 2 divided by root 2 all square. The square cancels the square roots, and we are left with 2. So finally we have root 2 divided by 2. So we can simplify this as root 2 divided by 2, comma, 0, comma, root 2 divided by 2. And we can represent this in the vector component form as root 2 divided by 2 I cap plus, now because the y component is 0, we are going to leave that out. So we have plus root 2 over 2 k cap. So basically this is the unit vector in the direction of vector C. Now let's move on as we solve the next example. So for example 2, we are going to find the unit vector in the direction of the vector 5i cap minus j cap plus 2k cap, which has a magnitude of 8 units. So we are going to find the unit vector in the direction of this vector, which has a magnitude of 8 units. So basically what we are going to do is, first of all, we are going to find the unit vector in the direction of this vector. Then we multiply that vector by a magnitude of 8 units. So basically that's what we are going to do. So let's try this example or this question together. Now first of all, we say that let A be the vector 5i cap minus j cap plus 2k cap, and we can as well express this vector in scalar component form as 5, -1, 2. Now let's move on as we find the magnitude of this vector. So we have the magnitude of vector A to be equal to the square root of the square of the x component plus the square of the y component plus the square of the z component. So that is equal to, we have the x component to be 5, so 5 square, plus y component -1, and then z component 2. So this is equal to 5 square is 25, -1 square is 1, 2 square is 4. Now 25 plus 1 is 26, plus 4 is 30. Therefore we have the magnitude of vector A to be square root of 30 units. So this is the magnitude of vector A. Now let's find the unit vector in the direction of vector A. So that is given by A cap, and that is equal to vector A divided by its magnitude. So we have vector A to be 5, -1, 2, and then we divide by its magnitude. So that is root 30. So that's going to be, we are going to divide each component by root 30, so that we have 5 divided by root 30, comma, -1 over root 30, comma, 2 over root 30. So basically this is the unit vector in the direction of vector A. Now we are asked to find the unit vector in the direction of vector A, which has a magnitude of 8 units. So we are going to multiply this vector by 8. Therefore we have 8 times A cap, and that is equal to, we are going to multiply each element of A cap by 8. So we have 8 times 5 over root 30, comma, -1 over root 30, comma, 2 over root 30, and that is equal to, now 8 times 5 is 40, so we have 40 divided by root 30, comma, 8 times -1 is -8, so -8 divided by root 30, comma, 8 times 2 is 16, so 16 divided by root 30. Now since we have the denominator to be a z, we need to rationalize it. So let's assume that we have any value, say x, divided by root 30. Then basically we are going to multiply the numerator and the denominator by root 30, so that will be giving us, we have x times root 30 divided by root 30 times root 30 is root 30 square. So the square cancels the square roots, and then we are left with 30. Now in place of x, we have 40, -8, and then 16. So that's going to be 40 root 30 divided by 30. Now 40 divided by 30 is 4 over 3. Therefore we can simplify this as 4 over 3 root 30, comma. Now for the y component, we have negative 8 root 30 divided by 30. Now 2 goes into 8 4 times, 2 goes into 30 15 times. So we can simplify this as negative 4 over 15 root 30, comma. And for the z component, we have 16 root 30 divided by 30. Now 2 goes into 16 8 times, 2 goes into 30 15 times. So we can simplify this as 8 root 30 divided by 15. Now we can represent the vector 8a cap in the vector component form as 4 over 3 times root 30 I cap minus 4 over 15 times root 30 j cap plus 8 over 15 times root 30 k cap.